Good day, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com, and you're here for another great DevOps.com webinar. Today's webinar is DevOps Meets Next-Gen Technologies, and it's sponsored by Oracle. Before we begin today's webinar, though, let me just take a quick moment and explain to you how we hope to interact with the audience today for this webinar. And I don't have to tell you, but our experience shows us audience participation makes for the best webinars. We've set aside time for questions at the conclusion of the slides and deck we've prepared today. But we don't want you to wait until that time to actually ask your questions. If you look at your GoToWebinar control panel, you will see a question section. And if you hit the arrow, make it face downward, it'll expand. And you'll see that you could ask your questions in there in real time. If you're like me, you may forget your questions by the time we get to the end of the presentation today. So rather than forgetting or trying to remember them or sitting on your hands, please type your questions in there in real time. We have a team of folks combing through. If it's the kind of thing that you need to answer right away, we'll try to do that. And we're going to try to pull the best questions for the panel to discuss at conclusion. And if we have so many questions, which would be great, that we can't answer them all in today's time period, we will have a written record of them because you've put them in here, and we'll be able to get your answers to you at a later date. In addition to questions from the audience, which we strongly encourage, we'll also be asking a few poll questions today. Polls are really simple, multiple choice kind of questions that you can click your answer to in a moment or second or two. And again, the quality and the experience you're going to have on the webinar will be greatly enhanced by your participation. So please answer the poll questions so we have a better idea of where you are on your journey, using DevOps and next-gen technologies. And it allows us to better custom our presentation for you. So please answer poll questions. Last but not least, we have the chat section of the control panel. If you're having technical issues, maybe the slides aren't advancing or audio is a little shaky, but you could still type into the chat window, please do so. Let us know what problem you're having. And we do have engineers standing by who will try to help you with whatever issue it is and correct it so that you can fully enjoy today's webinar. With that being said, let us get started. So as I mentioned, today's webinar is DevOps Meets Next-Gen Technologies, and it's sponsored by Oracle. A quick agenda for today, I'm going to introduce the panel, and it's actually a very short panel, smaller panel than usual. We are then going to talk about the survey results, we'll get into the survey questions, the results, some analysis, and then we'll come back to your questions at the end. Let me introduce our panel. So I'm happy to say that this DevOps Meets Next-Gen Technology webinar today was based on a survey conducted by Oracle and DevOps.com. And so I am going to be participating on behalf of DevOps.com. And joining me is Ashish Mohindru, who is Vice President, Oracle Cloud Platform. Ashish, I hope I didn't mess your name up too much. But welcome.
No, Alan, you said it. Thanks, Alan, and you said it just right. And welcome to everybody who's participating on this webcast.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's jump into things. Okay, so believe it or not, we're a few days out from 2018, and it's hard to escape the fact that DevOps is mainstream, and many next-gen technologies also appear to be mainstream. But who in the organization is actually driving the adoption of these next-gen technologies? Is it coming down from the executive boardroom or executive offices? Is it coming bottom up from technologists? Is it middle out from middle management? Is it a combination of all three? We're gonna explore that a little bit. What benefits are organizations seeing from adopting next-gen technologies into their DevOps processes? We would hope that we're seeing that 1 + 1 = 3 type of equation, But you know what? When we look at our survey results, we'll see it. Not everyone is seeing those kinds of returns. And then why not? What are the challenges? Where are the bumps? What tips can we give you based upon what our survey results show that can help you overcome and in some cases, and Ashish, I think you'll agree, very real challenges that organizations are facing when we look at DevOps and next-gen technologies. So let us go do a little demographic. So the survey that this is based on, it looks like we're getting just a little thing here, but the survey that was based on had 575 respondents, over 550 people, as I say here, respondents responding to our survey. And it was a really great mix of people, but for purposes, I want to just point out a few things here. I want to first of all say that 50% of the respondents were part of organizations that we would consider as large enterprises. And then the other 50% was sort of just about half and half between medium and small. So a nice mix there, but certainly weighted towards large enterprise. And then in terms of job level, again, weighted towards management, both senior management, middle management, and that level. If you added up all of the owner, executive, senior, and middle management, you'll see that it's a super majority of respondents. So I think we've got some real decision makers here. Okay. Let's go to our next slide. Fantastic. And this really gets to the heart of where we are here, right? So DevOps and next-gen technologies adoption. And what I will tell you is with both of these questions that you're looking at, these were right in line with surveys we've done previously at DevOps.com, as well as surveys we're seeing from firms like Gartner and Forrester and some of the leading analyst firms. Over 90% of respondents have at least some DevOps activity underway, or they're planning to do so within 1 year, right? So the argument that DevOps is still sort of a niche is really gave way in 2017. And as we enter into 2018, there's little doubt that DevOps is mainstream. On top of that, who are the sponsors, if you will? Who are the people who are pushing the adoption of next-gen technologies into the DevOps processes, into the DevOps way of doing things? And what you can see here is overwhelmingly, it's coming down from the executive. So it's top down. CIO, senior IT executive is the biggest single part of the market, selection. But CTO, CEO, I mean, between those three, you have, again, a good super majority here. But even senior software development executive, which probably can fit into either the CTO or CIO, senior IT exec. I mean, these are, little doubt that it's top down. And Ashish, just wanted to give you a chance to comment, if you'd like, on that. Is that something Oracle is seeing, or thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Alan. And this is something that we're seeing pretty consistently across our customers and companies that we engage in. That first of all, DevOps is becoming really mainstream. So you can't have a conversation with any of these companies without having a conversation about DevOps these days. And the biggest driver for that is the business requirements, right? Companies want to understand their customers better. They want to get closer to the end users, and they really want to compress the release cycles. So in the industries that they're in, whether it's retail, manufacturing, financial services, there's intense competition. And what's really happening is these companies are trying to figure out ways of how they can respond faster to market changes, how can they respond faster to customer needs, and how can they improve the quality of their offerings, right? And all of that is dependent on how they actually are organizing inside and delivering DevOps or using DevOps to deliver better functionality and services to their customers. So it's very much top-down in a lot of these customers where the executive suite is very much engaged. And depending on the size of the company, sometimes it's also bottoms up. But a lot of the large companies, we're seeing it's actually a corporate level initiative that they're engaging with.
Absolutely. You know, early on in the DevOps adoption phase, we used to call it DevOps or die, right? And you know, all kidding aside, for a lot of these companies, it is innovator or die. Let's move on to the next slide, though. And I want to, you know, we bandy about the term next gen technologies, and I just wanted to give us a definition, or at least, you know, what do we mean by next gen technologies here, right? And so what we're talking about are things like containers, which are rapidly becoming this gen, right? And in terms of their adoption rate, microservices, which is, man, just a, you know, a behemoth on the horizon. Security and performance monitoring, which is, you know, is really finding its mark, I think, as we move forward here. Serverless architecture, which probably really truly is sort of the bleeding edge of next gen still, as we'll see, but very, very much in there. AI, and along with AI, of course, machine learning, right? It seems to be a hot topic on everyone's lip, but how much are we really, you know, seeing that? IoT, Internet of Things. So this has been the next big thing for probably the last 3 years. But, you know, how much of it are we seeing, you know, play itself out into this space? We'll talk about that. And then chatbots, whether you're talking about chat ops or chat, you know, messaging or what have you. Certainly chatbots and stuff like that has really made its mark in here. And then, you know, the latest industry darling, blockchain. Whether you're talking about it, you know, in terms of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency or security, you know, everyone thinks blockchain could be the next panacea. But between them all, it's quite a collection, high on promise. But let's see, you know, what the actual delivery is. So that's what we mean when we talk about next gen. Let us now jump in here and see what kind of adoption cycles we've seen according to our survey results. Okay, so we're looking, and we've tried to make this easy on the eyes for you, and the slides are kind of the slides in sort of size order in terms of adoption. So as you can see, according to our over 550 or 575 respondents, you know, almost 70% have already adopted containers in some way. And, you know, another 20-something%, almost 30%, are planning to do so within the next year. So you could see that, you know, within the next year, containers will be deployed in darn near 100%, 90-something% of organizations. Microservices, not that far behind. Actually, when you go to 12 months out, microservices are near 100% as well. Performance and security monitoring and analytics, also very, very high. So to me, those three form a core group of next-gen technologies that I consider sort of already going mainstream, right? And Ashish, I just want to run through the rest of these, and I'd like to come back to you on this. Serverless computing, AI and ML, AI and machine learning, you know, you could see the futures ahead of them. They have greater adoption within the next 12 months than they do now. And they're still below that 30% mark, which to me means they're not quite mainstream. IoT, surprisingly, for everything we heard, is actually lower than AI, ML, and serverless computing. Chatbots, chat ops, about the same with IoT, maybe a little bit more upside. Blockchain, for all the buzz and the noise and the bubble around this crypto stuff, again, relatively low adoption numbers. And then maybe this was suspected, maybe not, but virtual reality or VR and augmented reality, you know, well down there, you know, barely a blip. So, you know, now there might be challenges that are causing this. We get that. but they're not displayed here. We're going to talk to them, and we'll get into challenges in a second. But before we get into the challenges, Ashish, what do you think? Looking at these results, is this consistent with what you guys see at Oracle, what you're seeing and talking to customers? What do you think?
Absolutely, Alan. No, this is a great point. So I think you phrased it well. There are certain technologies in this next gen, I would say, bucket that have actually already gone mainstream, like containers, microservices, and performance and monitoring. They absolutely are mainstream. You can't, anytime you're doing in the DevOps project, right? Every company is looking at either building new application and deploying it on containers in a vast majority of the new projects, or they're looking at modernizing their legacy applications and packaging it up as containers to move it to the cloud. So if you're seeing a lot of that activity happening in every company that we engage with, companies are very interested in new kinds of application development and assembly with microservices. So tremendous number of projects that are underway in terms of developing microservices. API first development has really become the mantra. And so we've seen this is the second wave of DevOps that's really emerging, where companies have moved beyond just the infrastructure stage to say, how do we really leverage cloud-based infrastructure or virtual infrastructures into actually going into leveraging these technologies for the next gen application development, modernization, or any other workloads that they really they're interested in. And then we see a set of technologies, what I put in the emerging buckets, where there's a tremendous amount of interest, and I would say tinkering, right? Serverless absolutely is in that category. There's a lot of interest in serverless, and there's a lot of interesting applications that are being developed on serverless, right? These are a lot more event-driven applications where you need the compute capacity or storage capacity for a small amount of time, and you don't want to pay the full price of renting a computer for an hour or even for a minute. So there's a lot of interest in terms of cost savings, and we'll go deeper into that section later in the presentation. And other technologies like AI, there's a whole concept, a new category emerging called autonomous. So how do you really leverage machine learning and AI to really automate the DevOps chain, right? So how do you really make sure that these systems are auto-patching, auto-tuning, auto backups, and so on and so forth? How do you leverage a lot of the stuff to automate a lot of the DevOps tasks that individuals have to do today? So lots of interesting things happening in the emerging bucket, where companies are just starting to kind of engage with it and try to experiment new kinds of applications and use cases around them.
Yep. But you know what I find interesting, Ashish, and I'm old, granted, right? But the time from adoption to supermajority mainstream, right? Because I used to think mainstream, look, you got 50% or more, you're mainstream, right? We look at containers, microservices, even today, they're approaching 66, 60% today, let alone in the next 12 months. But if we would have looked at this chart just 12 or 24 months ago, we would see containers and microservices probably closer to where chatbots and blockchain are almost, right? So, in true internet fashion, the time compression of how quickly these things come on the horizon, and then, wow, they just, like a tsunami overwashing the space, reach really mainstream adoption. And it's, that speed of business, that speed of adoption, I think is what forces, as you were saying earlier in the slide before, it's what forces these companies to adopt DevOps and automation and API and all of the things that we're seeing happen. And it's like, I'm never sure if it's the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. Do the APIs and automation foster quicker adoption, or does the quicker adoption requirements foster the APIs and automation? You know what I'm saying?
No. Right, Alan. I think this is just the market realities, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we're moving at cloud scale. So look at any industry today, from transportation to, service industry like hotels. Every one of them are getting disrupted. So there are new entrants coming in with new business models, which are very disruptive, and companies have to respond faster. So they're looking at technology platform as a way for them to deliver services faster. And a lot of these new innovations, from AI to chatbots to serverless computing to containers, all of these things are really enabling them to move in that direction. It's actually not only giving them agility, it's giving them flexibility, tremendous amount of cost savings, and more importantly, they're able to respond a lot better and a lot faster to the customers and deliver a higher quality of service than they've ever done in the past. So as a customer, as a consumer, we benefit tremendously out of it. And that's also driving the pull for a lot of these technologies to be implemented within their own organizations.
Excellent point, Ashish. And that's something that we should mention too, is it's almost the more we in the industry innovate, automate, accelerate, the more our customers, whether they be consumer or B2B customers, the more our customers expect that as the norm, right? What do you mean by internet doesn't work at 35,000 feet, over the Atlantic? Of course it has to work. And this is, it's kind of like feeding the monster, right? The more you deliver, the higher the expectation. But
absolutely.
Let me, not all is rosy as we're painting, though. There are certainly challenges that were identified in the survey. And, we don't have them here on the chart, but I want to hit them, Ashish, and I'd like you to, comment on those and how they relate to the conversation we just had. So first of all, here are the things that some of the survey, or the highest ones that the survey respondents noted. Fragmented tool chains that have hindered standardization. I think that's certainly one. Complexity of applications. Complexity of IT environments, whether we're talking about distributed or multi-cloud or accessible across a variety of endpoints, IoT, mobile, and everything else that gets thrown in there. Our IT environments are there's no more perimeter. It's just much more complex. The DevOps culture itself, right? So this DevOps culture, and look, in the DevOps space, we talk a lot about culture and how important it is, and it is. I'm no doubt about it. It's very important. But that culture, that fosters innovation and acceleration, it demands collaboration. It almost calls for taking risk-taking, experimentation, failure forgiveness, right? You're supposed to fail fast, do a blameless postmortem, get your feedback loops going, and let's try it again, right? But sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times, those failures leave egg on someone's face and can slow stuff down. The other big challenge was testing. Test automation and security is still an afterthought, right? We can't. I saw a recent presentation, Ashish, where they were touting that 75% of code in applications is now tested before deployment, and they were saying what a great thing that was. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, who are the dummies on the 25%, right? Who would be deploying without testing for security, for unit testing, etc. But nevertheless, it's the world we live in. That pressure to release, and don't worry, we'll fix it. We'll get the feedback loops. It kind of makes our customers the beta testers here, or the guinea pigs in some cases. So, wanted to ask you, what do you think about these challenges?
No, I think these are very real, right? So, Alan, if you look at what's happened over the last, I would say, 5 years, right? The way we've done application development, testing, and deployment has completely been transformed, right, to the cloud. And what's different is, in the past, you had a pretty homogeneous stack. You build your stuff on one database, whether it's a SQL database primarily in that time. Then you actually had your application server and the web tier. And it was pretty standardized, right? Whether the Java stack or you can have a .NET stack and so on. It was very easy to kind of manage that, right? So you had a process in place, you were able to develop on it, deploy it, and test it. Now in the cloud, as we move towards very much a distributed architecture, and we move towards microservices, what you're really leveraging is a diverse set of technologies. You're using NoSQL, SQL, in-memory databases. Developers are using the languages of choice. So an application can be written, a complete application can be written now in multiple languages, right? It's a conglomeration or assembly of these different services written, whether it's in Java, Node.js, Python, C, you name it, right? Then you talk about the deployment complexity. It's the distributed architecture. So to manage this, it's become a lot more complex. To keep it all in sync, to manage it, to package it up, to test it, the complexity has just gone up tenfold. So it's really important that customers are, DevOps teams that are actually responsible for these services or applications have a platform, first of all, that is comprehensive in its nature and gives them flexibility to build these different kinds of applications. Then the ability to have monitoring and management of these applications, have the ability then to have a complete DevOps cycle synchronized from development to builds, to packaging it up, test them, and then able to actually have deployment options. All of these things now, they have to think ahead of time versus post as they're building out their applications and manage them over time. So I think what the companies is, the companies are really rethinking the way they are actually building out services and building out new functionality in that context, and they're looking for help. And they're actually looking for help in terms of tooling. They're looking for help in terms of giving them organizational structure, the support they need, everything else involved to be successful in their endeavors.
Excellent. So Ashish, I'd like to bring up our first polling question here for our audience. And again, as I said, these polling questions are only as good as your participation. So please, we're asking you to select the top 3 out of these. You could select more than one, but if you only select 1 or 2, that's fine too. But please let us know if you can vote here. Which of these are you using? And if you can give us that, we'll close off. We're going to close off questioning here in 5, 4. Come on, folks, a couple more votes. 3, 2, 1. Okay. You know what, Ashish? This is very similar to what our actual survey showed, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Almost 70% containers, chatbots, AI, ML, 20%. And then other or none, almost half of the people here. So interesting. Let's go back to our slides and move ahead now. All right. So we spoke a little bit about containers, and containers, certainly the industry darling of or at least the respondents, but it's all over, whether we're talking about Kubernetes or Docker or any of the various container ecosystem plays in here. And the thing, Ashish, about Kubernetes, about containers rather, is, I used to think it was really just a cloud. Containers go together with cloud like chocolate and peanut butter. But we're seeing containers, in hybrid environments, multi-cloud, bare metal, kind of things. When we ask people what were the top 3 benefits for using containers, increased flexibility, consistency of development environments, and more automation processes.
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead, Al.
No, I was going to say, Ashish, is that with what you see? Do you agree, disagree? Thoughts?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest benefits of containers that we consistently hear from our customers is portability, right? Because customers are actually deploying this. Like you said, it's not just the cloud. They're actually deploying them on on-premise systems in their data centers. And what they're looking for is, can I move these applications or services that I'm deploying as containers in different environments? So if I package up a container, it's so much easier for me to shift it to the cloud or bring it back in, and then be able to have without much disruption in my services. So that part of it is huge for these customers, is portability. And I think that dovetails with increased flexibility. When they talk about flexibility, portability is one aspect of it in there. The second is they definitely want to see consistency, right? As the survey says, 38% of respondents said was consistency of dev test environments or dev environments. And the reality is that's one of the big issues that customers are also seeing in the cloud is, I can spin up a dev environment, but is it in a consistent manner? Because I also have development for large customers on premise. So they're doing hybrid dev tests. hybrid deployments, and containers become a really great mechanism for them to achieve their goals.
I agreed 100%. So, Ashish, just a quick question, and that's around Kubernetes. Certainly this year we've seen I don't know if you want to say Kubernetes won the container wars or the dominance of Kubernetes, but we've seen Kubernetes sort of become the standard for container orchestration, container management. Obviously you're very involved with Oracle Cloud. What are you guys seeing over there?
Absolutely. I think Kubernetes has become the de facto standard for container management. So every company, including Docker, is starting to support Kubernetes. So I think from a platform perspective, every major vendor is starting to adopt Kubernetes and give that as a service to their end users for container management. And it makes life easier because now you don't have to worry about different management technologies to manage your containers. So it makes it easier to have one standardized offering, one standardized platform that everybody can build on or leverage to do more interesting things on top of for their particular business projects.
Got it. Good. Let us just want to quickly also mention before we move on to the right chart, the chart on the right hand side here, adoption trend, right? And pretty much what we showed you in the slide before, containers are 68, near 70% right now, with another 28% in the next 12 months. So as we mentioned, this is this is one quote unquote next gen technology that appears to be this gen really quick, or is becoming this gen very, very quickly. Let us move to the next slide, though.
So one thing I would just say on that one, Alan, just wanted to add one more point on that slide. When that point was, along with new projects, like I mentioned earlier, companies are also looking, especially larger companies, are also looking to move their legacy applications and systems and package them as containers, either within their own data centers or actually move into the cloud. So we're seeing a lot of new investment taking place for containers, and that's why there's a very high percentage of adoption of containers in the market is for both modernization of existing applications or legacy apps and also brand new application development. So just wanted to emphasize that as well.
Yeah, no, you know what? Thanks, Ashish, and you're absolutely correct, right? I mean, wouldn't it be great if we all worked in a green field and we could start fresh in a containerized environment and, state of the art? But the fact of Okay. Ashish, I'm sorry, you may not be able to hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me? I think
yes, I'm sorry. I was just saying you're 100% right. I mean, it's great if we all had a green field to work on, but the fact is it's a brown field out there. We have legacy apps, and the amount of them that are being ported to containers is really kind of astounding. I apologize for the audio interruption, though. Let us move on to our next question, which is a polling question. So if we could ask, what kind of applications are you building or managing with containers? I mean, again, please select all that apply. So again, folks, if you could vote, these polling questions are only as good as your answers. So please, if you can take a second or two here, we're going to close voting off in a few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thanks for those last second votes. Well, there you go, Ashish. I guess that kind of proves your point, right?
Yep. Yeah, so this is very consistent with what we are seeing with our customers and our actually users. It's real emphasis on actually modernizing existing applications.
Yep, I agree. I'm actually surprised it was that high. Let us move to the next slide now, and that's the next kind of darling of the next gen crowd, and that's microservices. And as we can see in this slide, in terms of adoption trend, it's actually it's not quite as high as container is right now. But when you take that 12-month view, it's 100%, 60 and 40, right? It's arithmetic. I mean, so certainly microservices are a huge impact. When we look at what are the top 3 benefits, though, for microservices, again, flexibility, agility, scalability. Ashish, I've heard from other IT execs that microservices holds the promise to change our IT infrastructure like nothing, maybe since the cloud or maybe client server before that. What do you think?
I think it's definitely has tremendous benefits for customers. I mean, this started out with long time ago with service-oriented architecture. The whole concept of, packaging up, breaking up an application into discrete services, and then having the ability to assemble them rapidly to really form your application or deliver a new, faster functionality to the end user. So the promise is very high, and now we have the technology and the application stack behind it, or technology stack behind it, to deliver on that promise. And that's why you see such tremendous uptake of microservices within the customer base. The whole idea behind rapid delivery of functionality, closing the gap with your customer, closing the gap with your market requirements in a very more compressed time frame, you need the ability to have microservices. You need access to microservices. The whole concept of API first development is behind delivering on microservices. So what we are seeing is companies really focusing heavily on it as they're developing new services or new applications. The intent is to build them as discrete services and then have the ability to rapidly assemble them or orchestrate them. In addition to that, they want to bring in, there's another emphasis, like you saw with containers, this is actually pretty much dovetailed with that, is a focus on bringing in your legacy application into the modern era. So how do I take a legacy application that has been working well for me, but now how do I incorporate that into the cloud environment, for example, or into this microservices environment? So what they're doing is exposing those legacy applications, or packaging them up, wrapping them up with microservices or API-first development, and then bringing them in as APIs as part of the overall application, so that it appears from the external perspective, it's a modern app and it's delivering on their business requirements. So we see on both sides, new application development and actually modernizing existing legacy applications. The use of microservices are heavy on both sides.
Absolutely. All right, let us move to the next of the big 3, if you will, and that is performance and security monitoring. Again, just under 60%, 57% current adoption, 36% within the next 12 months. Even with my new math, that's 87 and 6 is, that's 95% adoption within the year. And when we look at reasons, top 3 benefits, I'm not sure if it's coming out for everyone here, but enhanced security was 35%, rapid troubleshooting was 33%, and increased efficiency, 32%. So just about a third, and a third. So Ashish, though, I guess one question that pops to mind is monitoring for security and performance have existed for a long time, right? Certainly well before DevOps. What's changing about this area that makes it hot for DevOps-enabled organizations?
Definitely. This has been our topic. Security has always been a hot button for any IT organization for the longest time. And the challenge, or the approach in the past is always in a very fragmented manner. So you had, security and monitoring for individual applications or individual layer within the application stack as well. So what you never saw was a complete view or comprehensive view of what was happening across your entire application or across your entire, cloud environments or your entire data centers that the application is impacting or working with. So what's changing is there's a whole new focus on log-based analysis. So one area that's really changed is, hey, how do I really aggregate logs across multiple layers, right? Whether it's from your database, your infrastructure, your app, your web tier, across multiple applications, and then be able to introspect that and analyze those logs in a real time, and literally near real time, and then figure out anomalies that's happening, whether there are intrusions that have occurred, because logs are the best way to identify those. And then how do you remediate it in a compressed time frame? So a lot of these intrusions take place months in advance, and people for the longest time don't know what has happened in terms of security breaches. So those kind of things now are becoming more mainstream in concept of a DevOps platform. So you have integrated platforms that are able to do that now and have capabilities to actually scan these logs, introspect these logs, and really identify where these intrusions have taken place to help you remediate that in a short amount of time. The second thing, which is the next generation where we're moving towards, is this concept of autonomous discovery, right? So we are putting a lot of focus and leveraging AI and machine learning to actually be able to do that, self-introspect these logs, be able to now figure out how do you do auto patching. So patching was a big issue for companies, right? For the longest time, 90+% of breaches take place because of lack of adequate patching or timely patching. So how do you make sure that basic DevOps functionality, which are security related, are automated, and then use machine learning to make sure that we are able to scan these things in real time to identify if there's any remaining issues and address them in a much more compressed time frame to make the environment a lot more secure. So lots of innovation, lots of application of new next generation technologies to really address this particular issue.
Yep. You know, when we talk about hardcore benefits, I think you've hit some of them, Ashish, but I know off camera, off mic, whatever you want to call it, we were talking, you had mentioned a particular customer from Oracle in the financial services industry, or who provides services, you know, FinServ. And they were able to reduce development time by 25% through streamlined DevOps monitoring and resolving code issues before going into production. And that right there to me is sort of the meat and potatoes of what the promise of DevOps is about, right?
Absolutely.
So right in line. I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Ashish.
Yeah, I think you're referring to one of our customers called Multifont. Sorry, they're a company in Europe, which is a financial institution, and they actually really benefited from this. The stats that you actually highlighted, like 25% in terms of streamlined DevOps monitoring benefits, resolving issues much faster because of that. All that stuff is a real use case of how these technologies are really delivering value to customers today.
Absolutely. We could talk about this actually longer, but we're running a little behind, and I want to hit some of these others. So let us move forward. You know, Ashish, maybe after the new year, we could come back and do another deeper dive on these, but we've got a lot to cover. So our next kind of darling is serverless computing. A lot of buzz out there about serverless computing, but as you can see from the adoption trend, below 30% today, maybe another third of the market within the year, which would, look, that'll bring it to 60, a little over 60%. So certainly in the mainstream. Why? You know, what are the top benefits? Cost savings, faster software development, you know, cycles, and scalability. A lot of people lip service serverless computing, Ashish, but I don't know if they really understand the role going forward. How do you see the role of serverless computing?
I think this is an area of tremendous interest by customers. It's relatively new, and you know, depending on who you talk to, there's a different brand for this. Some people call it serverless, some people call it functions. And the whole idea is behind event-driven computing, right? So these are more event-driven use cases. A simple example I can give you is when you take a picture from your phone and you want to upload it and you want to put it on a server or a storage device somewhere, you don't need a compute environment for an hour. Maybe in this case, when you upload it, you just need it for a few seconds or maybe for a few minutes. And what you don't want to do is pay for this, depending on typical, you know, site charges, whether companies bill you by the minute or they bill you by the hour or they bill you by the entire, you know, space that you kind of leased out on their rack. And it's additional cost for these companies for a millisecond or a nanosecond task on the compute environment. So what customers are really interested in is how do I reduce my cost and only pay for what's actual usage is there. So serverless really helps you deliver on that promise. So for some discrete tasks, it really makes sense because you're only processing that task for a nanosecond or a millisecond. And all you want to do is just be charged for that particular amount of compute resource utilization. So that's where the customers are really excited about it. It's like, how can I basically leverage this technology and deliver this value to my end customer? So they have some very discrete use cases, but they're mostly event-driven. And again, this is more in the early stages where companies are really trying to figure out how do we make it mainstream. Now, one thing about this is typically serverless has been associated just with the cloud. So they think I can only get access to serverless computing just because it's I have to sign up with a cloud provider and leverage their serverless environment. Now, what we have done as a company, we've actually made this an open source project. So we've actually given up a given code, and we call it function.io, where you can actually download this from GitHub, and you can have this capability in any environment. You can have it within your own data center or any other cloud vendor that you choose to kind of adopt or work with. So you have access to this technology that you can deploy on your own and leverage for free.
Excellent. Ashish, why don't we move to the next slide here? Artificial intelligence, which was also about machine learning. Just again, guys, if you have any questions, pop them into your question section so that we have them lined up here, because we're going to be cutting this one, I can tell, close to the top of the hour, and I want to make sure if you have questions, we get to them. So Ashish, next we have artificial intelligence, AI, as some call it. You know, some people think AI and machine learning will usher in the next era of man. Others say it's going to be the reason for our extinction. But when we look at adoption trends, again, not, only just about 25, 26% now, another 40% in the next 12 months. I think part of the issue is defining what we mean by AI and ML. But when we look at top three benefits, automation, obviously big, productivity, very big, cost savings, not quite as big as the other two, but in the top three. What are you longer term? AI,
this is what
does it mean?
Yeah, so Alan, this is one of the most exciting areas where a tremendous amount of research and R&D is actually really going into it. So you can't talk to any vendor or any customer of ours who is not actually experimenting with it. Even though the adoption trend is low, they're all interested in this area and trying to figure out how they can apply AI across different areas of their organizations. So this is really an area where we are investing a tremendous amount of energy and resources into, and kind of really spearheading a new category called autonomous software. The whole idea behind that, Alan, is what we're really trying to do is we look at a typical DevOps cycle. And if you think of a typical IT ops person's job, if I'm deploying a database, what I'm doing is I'm actually have to back up the database. I have to patch it on a regular basis. I have to deal with upgrades. I have to tune the database for maximum efficiency and performance. And then I also want to make sure it's scalable. So I have to add in new nodes, or if it's elastic, I have to take away nodes based on the workloads. So if you think about that, there's a number of tasks that are required to run that database efficiently. Now you add in additional components of an application server, a web server, and so on and so forth. You can see the complexity is really, really high. And that's where a lot of our DevOps teams are really focused on, is making sure everything is working smoothly for their applications or their services. Now, with autonomous software, what we're doing is we're saying, how can we apply AI and machine learning to automate all of this, right? So from a DevOps perspective, you don't have to worry about patching anymore. So they're timely patches. So now you have much better security. And like I mentioned earlier, 90+% of breaches will cause because of lack of adequate patching or timely patches. How do I make sure these are backed up, system is backed up and adequately on a timely manner, so that now you can have disaster recovery, which is much more easier than if ever the system ever goes down, you have that capabilities, and you're kind of confident that you have everything backed up and you haven't lost much. How do you make sure the upgrades are taking place without disruption? And more importantly, tuning these systems. So all of this stuff will be done automatically or in an autonomous manner that the DevOps team wouldn't have to worry about it. They can focus on higher value tasks versus worrying about this mundane stuff or making this operational side work efficiently. So that's where the next generation of AI is really being applied towards in the context of DevOps.
Absolutely. Good. Let us next, because we're running lower on time, let's move over to IoT. Ashish, I have to admit I was disappointed in the adoption trend on this one. I thought it would be higher. And what's even scarier is even within the next 12 months, it's really not, still comes in under 50%. Benefits, enhanced communication and collaboration, more efficient alerts, improved workflows. Agreed. What do you think IoT brings to DevOps?
I think the bigger things is, IoT is still, I would say, in the early stages. There's a lot of hype about IoT. It's been the concept of this around for a while. Companies are trying different things. And I think it also varies by industry. So, if you look at automotive, for example, there's a tremendous amount of adoption in terms of embedding sensors in cars so you can track them in real time. And then you can actually identify issues or optimize routes or efficiency of these cars. So a lot of these things from an end user use case perspective is actually being very well adopted or starting to get adopted. From a DevOps perspective, it depends on the industry you're in, where the DevOps teams are leveraging that data for better optimization of their tasks and better delivery of services for their end users. That's what I would say about why the adoption rates show up a little bit low in this particular survey.
Fair enough. And maybe that we'll see. I wonder a year from now if we redid the survey, if what would really change here. Next is something, chatbots. Some people refer to it as chat ops, alerting, what have you. But again, I personally, and I will confession here, we use Slack here at DevOps.com an awful lot. It's replaced a lot of our email communication even. But when we look at adoption trends, really low, less than 0.25%, and maybe just another quarter of the, not 0.25%, less than 1/4 of respondents using it, and maybe another quarter looking to adopt it within the next 12 months. Similar type of benefits, enhanced communication and collaboration, more efficient alerts, I think hands down, but that was actually smaller than improved workflows. Chatbots, chat ops, it's I don't think, the IT industry has been looking for something to replace email forever. I don't know if we ever will, but will it become the dominant form of communication? And what's nice about it, it's both human and automation, machine interaction, or is it just today's, shiny trinket? Ashish?
We see a lot of actual interest in this particular area. So, it started out as an experimental thing where, you would go to the social media sites and you'll see these chatbots pop up and will answer your questions. Now it's getting a lot more adopted within the main enterprises. So what we are seeing is it's becoming one of the main communications mechanisms within organizations. And what we noticed also when we engage with customers is there are two kinds of applications for these chatbots. One is customer facing, where they're trying to improve customer service. So you come in, you have a question, it'll look up the knowledge base and respond to you in real time. Or it'll do automated tasks where you want to reserve a ticket. It'll tell you, if you want to go reserve movie tickets and so on like that, for example. Depending on the industry, there's some very interesting use cases which are customer facing. From an ops perspective or DevOps perspective, what we're noticing is this is becoming a very interesting use case for tracking applications in real time. So how do I get alerts, real-time alerts on the performance of my application? Is it meeting my SLAs? Am I discovering new issues with it? I want to be alerted in real time. And there are integrations of these bots with systems like Slack. Slack has a lot ability to kind of add in new bots. Oracle has a platform through which you can build these chatbots in a relatively short amount of time, really quickly, and then be able to integrate that with systems like Slack and so on so that there's an integrated chain of communication. So you know of issues in real time, and then you are able to collaborate internally, look up your own, technical knowledge base to understand what if this is a issue that's been repeating over time, what is the resolution, or be able to collaborate with your peers to get the right answer and resolution of that issue in a short amount of time. So very interesting use case for DevOps is becoming a dominant communication channel, both for monitoring and collaborating.
Excellent. Guys, we're going to do our polling question here. We're going to do it quickly because we're running a little low on time. And it's really about chatbots or chat ops. Select all that apply. What are you using it for? Right? How are you using it? Is it for customer service, automated notification, issue trafficking, maybe another reason, or you're not using it at all? Don't have a lot of time, so we're going to close polling off here in 5, 4, 3, 2. Come on, folks, give us your answers. Okay. Interesting. You know why I think we see such a high other, Ashish? I think, at least in our organization, it's just become a dominant form of internal communication. We have some single channels where we talk with partners or vendors or end users, but mostly it's internally here where we just communicate. What do you think?
I think absolutely. That's what I was referring to earlier. This is becoming the dominant communication channel. Within the company, especially if you're a large company, there's lots of these siloed knowledge bases. How do you really make sure you can access them in real time? And chatbot is a great mechanism for doing that, right? So I can do searches, I can respond to queries in a short amount of time, and I really get to collaborate more efficiently than ever before.
Excellent. All right, Ashish, we're running low on time. Let's quickly run through blockchain here. Again, very low adoption presently, 13%, only 20% in the next 12 months more. So it'll still stay below the, mainstream horizon. When we look at, improved workflow, enhanced communication and collaboration, enhanced quality of software. Certainly I could see that, it's going to enhance security. Just quickly, what does it mean for DevOps teams?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think blockchain is, again, one of those really new emerging areas, lots of interest that we see in terms of conversations. People want to learn a lot more about it. Adoption is still in the early stages, as you can see from the polling or the survey earlier. What we do see is there's a tremendous amount of value in this platform and technology. One is a trusted hyperledger, right? So you can have trusted transactions. I don't need to keep an audit trail separate. If blockchain is implemented the right way, it makes life a lot easier for DevOps perspective because I don't need to keep track of every transaction. It's already kept track of, right, with this particular platform, blockchain platform. So it makes audits a lot easier. You don't have to worry about that. It makes distributed transactions a lot more trusted, brings a lot of security into it, and makes you for interesting use cases for building out next generation applications. We see a lot of this being actually in early stage adoption in the financial close for companies, right? So if you're looking at financials, they are actually starting to adopt the ERP system. They're starting to adopt blockchain as a way of keeping track of their transactions with their partners, with their customers, and so on.
Okay, next, and we don't have a lot of time, is organizational structure and issues, and it kind of a little messed up here on my screen. I'm not sure if you're seeing that, but Ashish, I wanted to spend more time on this. When we look at the top challenges and we look at the mix between dev and ops on these, DevOps teams or what have you, or it really, we could learn an awful lot there. Is there a target mix between development and ops for DevOps teams?
It all depends on the company, right? This varies by the company, whether it's a small company, a large company. We see quite a varied mix. Typically in smaller companies, they don't have a big operations department, ops department. So typically more developers, right, which are the DevOps team. Larger companies that traditionally have had large IT ops groups, we see a mix, right? And it depends on the percentage, as you can see from the survey. It varies anywhere from 50-50 to 75-25, depending on the size of the company. What's really becoming important in that concept is people that are building applications are now getting to the front line of making sure these applications are performing according to their SLAs, right? Service level agreements. And there are issues, they're the most likely people to resolve that at the quicker pace. So we're seeing a heavier mix on developers in general, but depending on the size of the companies, the percentages vary.
Yep. Ashish, we were right at the top of the hour, but one question I really wanted to hit was winning executive support for DevOps initiatives was identified as another challenge, right? We spoke about it briefly earlier. When we're talking about transformations, and even at Oracle itself, which has undergone its own DevOps journey, right? How should they be done? Are they top down, bottom up, middle out? Can you succeed without executive sponsorship? That might be our last words here, and I'm going to let you finish it off.
All right, thanks, Alan. So it depends on the different company sizes, right, and the projects you're coming through. Typically, in a larger organization, it's really important to get the executive level sponsorship behind these initiatives. At Oracle, we went through the same journey. You know, we used to be in a waterfall model of application delivery. We wanted to get more agile, move towards agile delivery, and now moving towards continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD. And from us, the executive sponsorship came from the very top down, right? Our president of the software group pretty much gave us the directive to really move in that direction. And the company transformed itself based on that direction and that sponsorship. Now, for other companies, some areas, they have to prove out the concept before they get the religion. So the idea is start small, get a project under your belt where you have DevOps as a structure, and then move towards this delivery of agile delivery to continuous integration and delivery, and show the value to your organization, quickly get the buy-in, and then scale it out. But it's really important after the project is over that you get that buy-in. If you don't get the buy-in, you're going to be a very tactical small project. You're never really going to become mainstream. It's going to be very difficult to become mainstream. So at some level, you're going to have to get the executive buy-in, just like a survey showed earlier, where a majority of these projects were actually sponsored by the C-level executives in the company.
Excellent. Ashish, I wish we had another hour to talk because we could easily use it, but we're already past the top of the hour. We have to respect people's time. We'll mention that, look, everyone attending, the results of this survey have been written up into a ebook report. It's available for, I think the people will get that along with their thank you for attending. But Ashish Mahindra, Vice President, Oracle Cloud Platform. Ashish, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe we'll talk offline. We'll figure out a way to continue this discussion. But thanks for joining us. Many thanks to Oracle for sponsoring it. Thank you for everyone who stayed here past the top of the hour. I appreciate it. I know your time's valuable. We'll hope to see you at another DevOpsCom webinar very soon. Happy holidays. Happy New Year to everyone. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye-bye.